Happiness through curiosity on the Ranveer Show. Could you give me the opinion of the Republicans on Obama's tenure as well as the Democrats on Obama's tenure?
Oh, it's so polarized right now. In fact, I can show you a graph where the moment the presidency switches sides, everybody's opinions of the economy and so on just totally flip or what have you. But basically, Democrats generally, and I mean this in almost a literal sense, I can probably find it to put it on screen. Yeah, like this kind of thing. This has been done so many times at this point that it's worn off. They called Bush Hitler. They called Romney a fascist. Everybody is called a Nazi, fascist, etc. So by sheer overuse, if you go and read communist propaganda, for example, you will see that they do the same thing. Everybody's a fascist, Nazi, etc., etc. And so unlimited force is justified against them. They're the enemy. And, there's various graphs, for example, on polarization over time in the US. And they tend to show that the left, here was like a rough center over here, right? And what happened was the left polarized first. The left moved further left first.
Okay, so the people who were originally Democrat with softer opinions got stronger opinions over time.
Yes.
Okay.
And then in response, the right moved right. Okay. So people will argue this, but this is from Pew, which is reasonably neutral even still.
So is centrism not a thing at all in the US?
Yes, it's not a thing anymore.
Okay.
In my view. And I can show graph after graph on that. Basically, the tribes have pulled apart.
We see extremity in India when it comes to pro-Modi and anti-Modi, where anti-Modi people will call him a dictator and pro-Modi will call him a god. But we have a good amount of centrists as well. But this is a stark difference that I see between America and India.
Yeah. So here's, for example, this is a graph that shows in 1950, people in Congress tended, whatever their party, to tend to vote together. By 2011, it was fully partisan. Democrats voted Democrats, Republicans voted Republicans. And this is not a short-term trend, it's a 70-year trend of almost like cell division.
You'll have to explain what this graph is.
What is this graph?
Geographic? Is it like...
Yeah, it's a network graph, right? So it's a graph that basically, so what is it depicting? The nodes here, each node represents a congressman, okay? And they're colored blue if they're Democrat and red if they're Republican. And there's an edge between congressmen if they voted yes or no together on the same bill. Okay, so you can see lots of bipartisan bills were passed back then, right?
It's a representation of their opinions, and some of them were still kind of centrist in their approach towards politics.
And they voted with each other across parties. It wasn't as polarized as it's become.
Gotcha.
But gradually over time, you can start to see almost like cell division, like mitosis. Gradually, you can start to see the parties pull apart. You see this, right? Until by, for example, 1995, you start getting party line votes. I mean, it's something where Democrats and Republicans are both doing this, right? So now you have cell division.
Wow.
Right?
Basically, they're mostly stopping listening to the other side and just going with what they believe.
Correct. And the thing about this is literally what mitosis looks like. You have a cell.
Damn.
And it divides in two.
So effectively, when policy is being discussed in the American government, at this point, all the Republicans stay with their own opinions and all the Democrats stay with their own opinions, and they're not willing to listen to the other side.
That's right. And this is what happens you take the body and you zoom in, and here's a cell, and it goes through a series of phases and eventually divides in two, right? So for the body, so too for the body politic.
Gotcha.
Right? If you think of, we're made of cells, but a country is made of people. It's like one level up. It's a meta-organism, right? There's now a process of literal cell division that's happening. And this was at the leadership level that I showed you over here. But now here, it's at the level of people. This is a totally different data set.
Explain this graph.
So this is showing Twitter nodes. So these are Twitter accounts, okay? And what's colored in blue are Democrat accounts that have declared themselves Democrat. They tweeted support for, this is from 7 years ago, by the way.
These are all media accounts, right?
No, just normal people.
Oh, okay.
The big ones there are big follower accounts that are mostly followed by blue or red, respectively.
Wow.
Okay.
Gotcha.
But basically, what this showed is by 2016, 2017, reds followed reds and blues followed blues.
And the green ones are?
The green was the rare neutral kind of Switzerland at the time. The Hill was like one of the very few outlets that both sides tended to cite, right? Because it gave relatively neutral political news. So-and-so was nominated, so-and-so, election results, stuff like that. That was considered uncontroversial then. But this was actually 7 years ago. What's happened since then is it's actually, let me pull up this chart. It's actually really gotten even more polarized because now they're not just like, in different parts of the same network. They're in different social networks.
Okay.
Okay, by 2024, blues are in Blue Sky and Mastodon and Threads, and reds are in X, and they're also in Gab and Truth Social and so, okay? So we have digital separation already that's taken place. And this is something which, it's like North Korea and South Korea.
This is the tech manifestation of echo chambers.
Well, it's not, it is echo chambers, but it's actually even more than that. It precedes, in my view, partition. There's going to be some very messy, and I can show graph after graph, chart after chart on this. For example, for almost 15 years ago, right, there's a book called The Big Sort, right? Why the clustering of like-minded Americans is tearing us apart, okay? And essentially was making the point that people were starting to ideologically sort to be near people who share their values. And in particular, blue states have an out-migration. They're losing, for example, here, let me zoom in on this. The ones that are in red are losing people, and the ones that are in yellow are gaining. And the really big numbers, for example, let me see, state to state migration, right? In general, people are tending, let me see if I can find a good, okay, here we are. So this shows, for example, in 2022, California lost more than 343,000 people, and Florida gained almost the same number. Florida and Texas are winning. California and New York are losing. Okay, so basically the blue-controlled states, people are voting with their feet against blue governance for red states.
Okay, hold on. So the color represents the political ideology.
Correct.
And the number represents the migration of human beings.
That's right. So Democrats run blue states and Republicans run red states at the governor level and so on and so forth.
Effectively, Americans are moving into Republican-run states.
So Americans, so that's right. Some Americans are, on balance, if Americans move between states, they move from blue America to red America. So red America is sort of winning that migration thing. And in fact, actually, if you look at U.S. state population over time, this has always been a really good, there's a great video here. So this is basically starting all the way back when it was, when these were like literally colonies with a few thousand people.
Right.
Right? And so in the 1600s, the big states.
This is like from, okay, go on.
It's really cool, right? It's a cool video. This is also another way of thinking about the emergence of what new countries will look like. I'll come back to that point. But so you can see these started with very modest populations. The United States was started like a startup.
Right.
With a few thousand people, right? This is less than like one village in India or something like that if you add all of this up, okay? And so it is possible to start new countries. Other human beings have done it. This is a theme we'll come back to. Anyway, so at the beginning, before the United States was even the United States, this is still before 1776, Massachusetts, Virginia, Maryland, it was like the, eastern seaboard that were this is like the Northeast.
This is Europeans moving in.
Europeans coming there, exactly, that's right. So Virginia is like this big state around this time, right? And if we skip forward, we start to see southern states, starting to get a little more populated. And right around here is, boom, that is now American independence, right? And so when you go and you read about where things were done during American independence, you'll read about, for example, Pennsylvania was big at that time. New York was also big all the way back then. Virginia was like a really leading thing back then. It's not really right now, not in the same way. It's next to DC, but it's not thought of as a thing in its own right in the same way. And so you look at this and you see, oh, wow, Ohio is really rising. And for example, in the 1800s, Ohio was called father of presidents because there are like 7 presidents that came from Ohio. And this is now considered like the Rust Belt part of America where it's down on its luck, right? But back then it was rising, and look at how Illinois rises. So these are now in the center of the country, right? Missouri rises. This is now is the cowboy era. They're moving out west. This is the Civil War time right now, 1865. And by the way, this is not completely continuous data. What's happening is they're taking the survey from every 10 years. Now see how Texas comes up? Okay. So what happens is in the late 1800s, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, still most of the weight of the U.S., as you think about it, is in the upper right corner of where the U.S. is, right? By the 1900s, you finally get, okay, boom, there's California, right? Mm-hmm. And notice that Florida isn't even over here in this discussion yet, right? It's not on the top, 10 or 15 most populated states yet. Now the Great Depression, that's when California really goes bananas, because all these people move out west to get their fortune, right? And now see how big a deal California becomes. In a few years, it becomes the most populous state by mid decade or century. And so now it's California, New York, Pennsylvania. But Pennsylvania starts declining, and when it declines like this, by the way, it just means it's less hot. People think about it less. Now see how Florida is rising, right? So in a sense, America is not just about elections, it's about migrations, right? So this is the time period I grew up in: California, Texas, New York, Florida. And these are still maybe the 4 most important states. But look at how Florida and Texas are gaining on, California and New York. And now it gets into like extrapolation territory around here, right?
Damn.
But basically, so that's like 400 years of history, right? And showing how population shift and how certain regions gain and fall and so on and so forth.
It's just the nature of America.
Yes, but it's another lens besides the elections. People talk about who's elected and who's politically in power, and that's important, but the migrations are on par with the elections in terms of understanding where people are moving to. If they have a choice, where are they going? They're going to where the jobs are. They're going to where the money is, where the excitement is. When the gold rush was happening, it was California. When the Silicon Valley was happening, it was California. Now that San Francisco and California are, in many people's views, so poorly managed, many are going to Florida and Texas. So that's what's driving that now, right? In previous times, in the 1800s, it was the industrialization of the Rust Belt, today's Rust Belt, but back then it was a booming area. Ohio and Michigan and Illinois, it drew people in.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip from the Ranveer Show, we've uploaded a ton of other clips related to a ton of other topics. So explore the channel because there's something for everyone.